Hello and welcome to another edition of The Front Page on GNAT-TV. My name is Andrew McKeever, the managing editor of the Manchester Journal, and I'll be your host today. And today it's my pleasure to have with us here in the studios of GNAT two gentlemen who have been closely involved in the community visits that many of you have been hearing a lot about. With us today in the studio are Paul Costello, who's the executive director of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, and also Lee Krohn, who's the planning director and zoning administrator of the town of Manchester. Gentlemen, welcome to GNAT.
Thanks so much, Andrew.
Great to have you both here. Well, as I said, over the last couple of months, area residents have been hearing a lot about the community visit, as we refer to it. It started off on March, shortly after town meeting, where Paul, you brought a team of about 20 or 30 high-powered movers and shakers, I guess we could call them, into town, and we had 5 or 6 community forums take place, culminating in a community dinner at Burton Academy. A lot of interesting ideas were tossed out at across those 5 or 6 forums. And then that was followed up on April 11th with a second visit where folks, I guess, narrowed down some of the ideas that were first voiced in March, and you settled on a group of priorities. I guess just to get us started, walk us through what happened on April 11th, and let's discuss these priorities and then see where we go from here. So how did we arrive at those 4?
Well, it's a long chain of public discussion, starting with a steering committee that set 9 different areas to explore, everything from poverty to youth and economic development. Those topics were the topics that we brought our team together around, and that we had our first major session with the community visit day. 13.5 hours of forums on those 9 issues, an hour and a half each, gives us a stack of notes on people's best ideas for moving the community forward. We then go through and we say, this is the same idea said here, here, and here, and we add them up. And we bring them together into a coherent cluster of key ideas that the community can choose from. That's what we presented on April 11th. Not what we thought was best for Manchester, because people in town know better than we do, but what we really heard as the key ideas that people had suggested. We brought those ideas, we put them on the wall at Burton. We had 160 people there who wrestled with them, said, you know, what's most important? What's within our power to do? What will make the most difference for the community in the future in terms of attracting and retaining young people, spurring economic innovation, you know, keeping Manchester true to itself, true to its character. Authenticity's been a big word in all of this,
Sure
but
has.
also looking forward. Right. So in a process of debate, we first, on the 11th, put points of vision on the table. What are the things that you want to see 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And we're actually turning all those points into a ballot that we're going to bring back to people in Manchester soon. What is it that you agree with in all these ideas? On the other hand, they looked at the 20 ideas on the wall of big action areas, and they chose the ones that, not that they want the town government to do or that they want the state and feds to do, but the things that they felt that if citizens lined up around and pushed, could be done. And that list is a core set of priorities. We go from that meeting to say, who's done this in other towns in the state? What state agency or federal agency has resources that could bring to bear? Are there technical services that would help working groups move these issues forward? And on May 21st, we're bringing another team back to Manchester of probably 15 to 20 folks that would sit down with volunteers to nail down a work plan and connections to resources to jumpstart this work and help it move forward. So that's going to be exciting, and that's where the rubber meets the road. It's all about local leadership. We're very confident that we've seen a tremendous mix of good ideas and good people ready to go to work to move things forward. And so we're really optimistic that a lot of good is going to come from this for the future of Manchester.
Well, the 4 priorities that were identified by the folks there on April 11th were 1, develop a small business incubator; 2, become a Viking Center and destination; 3, attract higher education opportunities; and 4th, redevelop the Riverside and open a river walk. Now, Lee, as planning director, you've been in that post for quite a number of years now. you probably heard those ideas uttered in one form or another in the past at one point or another. I guess my question to you would be, what do you think is different now at this point in time that makes those 4 ideas maybe more possible than they might have been at some point in the past?
Well, I think there are several answers to that. It's not unusual in life that ideas come up, but timing is often everything. So they're all great ideas. They have all been discussed in some form before, but I think now there's a new sense of optimism, of energy, of excitement about Manchester. And so I think it's really good timing for each of these. There are several key properties in transition right now. We hope that there will be new owners of those properties fairly shortly, who I think will be very thoughtful and consistent along the lines of business incubators. The Viking Center, that's been an idea off and on for a long time. There's actually a new bicycle club that has been formed in Manchester. We had a meeting and a dinner a month ago, and there were probably 60 people there. Wow. So, you know, that piece has some energy behind it, in addition to the folks who showed up last month to sign on to help with that. Higher education, we've always hoped for something like that. The Chamber did some surveys 20 years ago, and that was one of the 3 or 4 key priorities that emerged then. When we worked with Paul and his group on the Creative Economy Project some years ago, again, that was an idea that came forward. We began conversations with Marlborough, and the president of Marlborough was here as part of the initial resource team, and she seemed quite interested.
College over near Brattleboro?
And she seemed very interested in renewing that conversation. There may be other opportunities as well. And the Riverside, you know, that's been part of the town plan for a long time. There are regulatory challenges with doing that as a public project. Maybe it's easier to do it as a private project. Transition Town, that Paul mentioned earlier, they began redeveloping a Riverwalk. And so again, each of these areas I think has some renewed vitality and optimism attached to them, along with the dozens of people who've signed up through this process. So I think the stars are lining up to really help advance these initiatives.
Well, why don't we go through these one by one then and sort of unpack them and talk about them in some detail, and maybe you could also fill us in on why these 4 in particular seem to, you know, be the 4 winners, if that's the right word. Develop a small business incubator. What would that involve? Would that be something similar to what the Bennington County Industrial Corporation has going on in North Bennington? They have an old factory building there that was converted into, well, they call it a business incubator. Would we have a similar type of facility where entrepreneurs or folks who might have an idea, want to do a startup business, would be able to get cheap commercial space to work in to try and bring that plan to fruition, or would it be something else?
I think that the committee and the task force that's coming together around this is going to define the answers to that question. What was really interesting in the champion process that happened on the 11th is that you had young people saying, I'm ready to start a business. I need a place to go. I don't know, I can't afford a huge rent. I can't afford a huge space. But I'd love to work with other people and be in a co-space for a business development. So there's some places that are, you know, the Regional Development Corporation runs and manages a structure like that. It's highly formalized. In others, an entrepreneurial business person themselves opens up a business that they own for leased space for small businesses. A couple of intriguing things. A number of senior folks who've been in business in Manchester approached me and said, we're interested in helping some of these small businesses. We'd be glad to lend technical assistance and advice to start up businesses in a site. There's the longer dialogue on a number of open spaces that are underused or empty in this town that could be opened up in a productive way. And the larger frame of the conversation has been a real broad consensus among everyone in the process that Manchester really wants to define economic initiative, that people really value the tourism economy and the commerce that comes with it, but they also want Manchester to develop indigenous local industry and another generation of young entrepreneurs. So all those ideas come together, and when you look at the 20 some odd ideas that some of which didn't get to be priorities, there's key threads in the way people were thinking. One of the kinds of businesses could be arts businesses and studio space, depending on what the space may be. Another may be food systems businesses, value-added businesses that could help build markets for local farms and so forth. And others could be tech businesses that really look at the next generation of innovation that could happen here as well as in Manhattan or anywhere else. So how does the town kind of come together around a site that's going to help all those kinds of businesses grow and help people between 20 and 35 decide there's a place for me in this town. This town is eager for us to be here, and it's helping to make way for us to start businesses today that who knows how important those businesses will be 20 years from now.
Right. Well, Lee, let me throw number 2 to you as a biking enthusiast, I know. Become a biking center and destination. I'm sure you must have, that must have brought a smile to you when you heard that one make the top 4
Sure.
here. Is it what would go into making that happen? I mean, what beyond what we already have going on?
Well, before I get to that, I'd like to build briefly on Paul's thoughts on number 1, because it's no secret that the old Factory Point Bank building on Main Street is in transition. The second floor of that building would be an ideal possibility for a business incubator. It's already broken up into small offices with some open space, and we've met with some local business people, for example, who run businesses out of their homes. And sometimes those businesses grow to a point where they need to get it out of the house.
Right.
But they're not in a position to rent an entire building. This would be an ideal opportunity not only for some of those younger folks getting started, but for some experienced business people to share front office staff, share infrastructure, have a Main Street address, and have people to interact with rather than being solo businesses. So I think there's all sorts of opportunities. And I'd love to find out who some of those folks are who said they'd love to help, because we could sign them up for our SCORE chapter and help give them a venue by which to offer their lengthy business experience.
So a number of them will be volunteering. There's 30 some odd people who are volunteering to be on that committee and are going to come to the meeting on the 21st to help frame out how things can move forward.
So that's great. Yes, the cycling concept certainly makes me smile.
Close to your heart.
Very close to my heart. And I could certainly visualize that although cycling now, those of us who live here and love cycling, love this area, visitors love coming here, but there's not much of a formalized sort of place or structure to find out. If you come here as a visitor, you can go to the bike shop and they're very helpful, handing out maps, giving people routes, but this could become a whole sort of center for cycling tours, whether it's attracting somebody like Vermont Bike Touring to come down to this area, or whether it just becomes known over time as that's a great place to go for a weekend or a week. Bring your bike, because if you stay at this selection of motels, they're very welcoming. They'll let you bring the bike into the room because they get it that the bikes are pretty valuable to those who own and enjoy them. Not everybody's on board with that. We're trying to install more bicycle racks around town because you get caught in a catch-22. How do you encourage cycling if there's no place to put your bike? Maybe we could start working with employers to offer bike racks and showers to employees to lessen the need for cars on the roads. And this could spiral into all sorts of possibilities so that it becomes like some places up in the Northeast Kingdom that have become known for snowmobiling or known for mountain biking centers. Maybe this becomes the road biking capital of Vermont. And it becomes a more broad-based piece of the whole economic puzzle in a way that creates a lot of positive outcomes and virtually no negative impacts.
The streets are probably too narrow to build a bike path onto the sides of the roads at this point, or
there's
is
talk
that
in the outline of work that people are considering is the potential for a bike path, and where that may go is a big question. People in Rutland have just done a multi-million-dollar bike path that's in process. We'll be bringing some of the leaders who are actually doing that work here to Manchester on the 21st to help share what's worked for them, and if as this new group sets its goals and so forth, they'll have direct connection to folks who can share, step by step how they worked and where they found resources, how they raised money, what the federal government could do for them and what the state could do for them and so forth. So we're helping to tee things up. We can't own this. We can't really lead it. It's all about local folks. And so the chair of this process, Brian Keefe, will be working with us and other folks to help chair people emerge and people line up to work really in an organized fashion to move these things forward.
So higher education, another area that was identified and again has been discussed in the past. I mean, how would that work? Would that be a school? We would want to have a junior college or some kind of post-secondary education facility, what, in an existing building here in town? Or would this be a new building or a new campus? What would be
I think the ideas are range everything from having some community college classes in an existing facility or in the new library to getting a satellite campus from a regular school, to some people mention the redevelopment of a school on the mountain road as a potential thing. I think
the former Bromley Book School?
Again, what you've got is a concentration of people who want to see this because they see it as a lever for economic development and for attracting young people and giving dynamic activities, but also educational opportunities for people of all ages. It's a long conversation, like you've said, but you've got a really strong, the interesting thing from my point of view is the strength of the people here and the leadership capacity and resources that people bring to the table. So there's some very smart people with resources looking at this. We also have the interest. I just talked to the chancellor of the state colleges system yesterday, and he's either going to come or Dan Smith, their director of policy, will come. We'll be talking to Ellen McCulloch-Lovell, the president of Marlborough again, and we'll be bringing people in who can sit down with this team to say, well, here's what we might be able to do, or here's what you'd have to do to attract courses here. And they're ready to have that conversation with you. They'll follow the lead from the town. So if there's enough energy and there's enough strength in that leadership, again, you have an opportunity to make things happen right now.
And then the fourth one is the Riverside and Riverwalk. And Lee, you mentioned that there were regulatory issues around that it may have made that redevelopment a little bit difficult in the past. I mean, what were some of those roadblocks? Because I know, I think it was a year or two ago, the Transition Town spearheaded an effort to kind of clean that area up and put in a little walk there, which is very pleasant little stroll one can take, and a little jewel inside the center of town. What did folks want to see beyond what's there now? More trails or?
Well, the conversation has long revolved around the notion of, for example, there used to be a bridge across the west branch of the Battenkill from historic Main Street to the Friends of the Sun area at the town, what's now the Town Green. There was an issue there a long time ago. The bridge was vandalized and torn down, and there was no interest in rebuilding that. It's not easy to do, but there had been thoughts about taking the old Main Street that goes down behind the Kimball Grist Mill and the old Factory Point Bank building and kind of revitalizing that as a little vendor, pedestrian, crafts, arts sort of place. Could you create a way for pedestrians to walk along the river all the way down toward the shopping center instead of walking along Depot Street? Which also goes along with the present relaunched study to take a fresh look at Depot Street and see how we could make that a more pedestrian-friendly environment and not just a thoroughfare for motor vehicles. But when you're doing work on steep riverbanks next to rivers, you get into a whole host of not only land-based concerns about subsidence, but regulatory issues at the state and federal level that can make these things just much larger than life to do. And you get into access compliance issues and how do you actually fit that in there? Or are there other ways to enhance the pedestrian experience that aren't necessarily right next to the river? But the sky's the limit in terms of ideas. When we did the Town Green project back in the 90s, we had visualized a little overlook. We have one now by the mill pond. At the other end of the green, there was another area that could lend itself to another sort of overlook. And maybe we do or don't build a path all the way down to the river, but maybe it revitalizes that idea of making the river a more visible and enjoyable part of the downtown experience rather than hiding it behind buildings. So a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. We'll have to see how the pieces might actually play out.
So where do we go from here in the time we have left? May 21st, back at Burton again, we're going to have the, I guess, the third
Yeah, we're
part
working
of this.
on the site. It'll be a 6:30 to 9 o'clock meeting.
Okay.
Again, we'll be bringing a team in. We'll have a general conversation of where we are. We'll break into 4 work groups. In each work group, we'll have a facilitator and experts in doing this kind of work who will not make decisions for the group, but will help inform the group as it lays out what its first action steps are. What would you do now to redevelop the Riverside? What are the things you need to learn? What are the potential steps you're going to need to take? What are some of the regulatory issues and so forth? And so laying out what would you do over the next 3 to 4 months in that area, and then what are some of the resources that can help you? What would the Planning Commission be able to do? Are there sources outside of town of expertise? Are there potential feasibility funds or grant funds that could help you go to the next level? And just sort of flesh out the nuts and bolts of what you could do to move this issue area forward. And then the group will evolve. One of the interesting things, at the last meeting, people are always disappointed because you're not doing all 20 ideas at one time. You're not becoming the most carbon neutral town in the state of Vermont tomorrow, and you're not building a co-op tomorrow. You're looking at the key things that you think are going to be most vital and most powerful. And the next stage is really getting from those as key ideas to the start of work plans in each area, so you can hit the ground, make it practical, line up to get things done around those areas. We'll also be reflecting back these points of vision. So we're getting more grounded. At the same time, we're sharing what we've heard from people as the big vision points of what Manchester wants to be in the future. And in a way, that's what we were invited in for at the very beginning of this process. That's what business leaders asked for in our first discussions together. So we're really excited about it. It's been a tremendously satisfying process. It's hard work. It's not perfect. There were moments on the meeting of the 11th where everyone felt like, oh my goodness, where's this going to go? Is this going to work? But people stayed with it, and with patience and with what seemed to me pretty wise decisions, they really centered. One of the most interesting observations, and then I'll be quiet, was that everyone was thinking about the future of youth, thinking about sustainability, and thinking about agriculture and all these other issues, the 20 issues. They didn't want to let them go, but they recognized that these 4 things would be really dynamic in supporting that next generation being successful here, and diversify and renew the sense of authenticity in a new era. And there's already good work going on around a lot of these, but if people lined up, you'd boost them tremendously. You'd give so much energy, it would influence the decisions of the municipality, it would practically move things forward, and it would have the community behind key directions for the future. So from our point of view, it's been fascinating, and we're really glad we chose Manchester because of the passion and commitment of people in this community to make a better future.
Now, following the meeting on May 21st, will there be some final report issued, or where will this all
Yeah, we've got
wind up?
some photos from Lee that we're going to use. Thank goodness. But it's all compiled. Nothing is lost. So this is going to be a long report. We had probably 35 pages of dense notes from the community visit day. We'll share those. We'll share the sessions that we had with high school students, which were very visionary and very thoughtful, really thoughtful conversation. And then we'll share the ideas that we heard, we'll share the priorities, we'll share the work plans, we'll have an introduction, and we'll kind of tie it all together so that it's not a report that goes on the shelf, it's actually a compiled work plan developed by the community for the future, with a vision statement up front. It's not the official vision statement of the town. It's not the official work plan. It doesn't have tax liabilities in it or any of that kind of stuff. But it's a guiding document that will will really be a compendium of some of the best thinking of people in this community and the priorities that people have established and the work going forward. So we hope it'll be useful to people as it goes forward.
And then it'll be up to folks like you, Lee, to actually implement it, which I always thought would be the hard part of all of this.
But everybody.
Right, and as was led by the poem that Brian Keefe read at the last session, the whole notion that they is us. So it's not about coming up with ideas for them to do or someone else to do, but for us as a community together. And echoing on what Paul said about working with Manchester, it really is perfect timing. And I'm thrilled that their board chose us to work with at this very point, because I think there is a whole renewed sense of optimism and hope for the future. The roundabout finally got done, and I think it's fair to say looks and works better than anyone could have possibly imagined, and it's not quite done yet. So the timing is just so perfect with this sense of renewal and optimism about our community.
And just before we close and go, if folks did want to be on one of the 4 task forces around those 4 subjects, what should they do?
Everyone's an equal at every phase of this. They can contact us at info@vtrural.org, or they can look on the website, which is vtrural.org, and sign in there. They can contact the town offices and let folks know.
Sure.
We're gathering people. Additional people have volunteered since the start. I mean, when you think about this, when we did this with Rutland, we had over 150 volunteers at the beginning of this process. And in Manchester, we're approaching 90 volunteers right now.
Wow.
It's a tremendous number of people ready to work forward. Will they all be working on the same things in 2 years? Probably not. The world will change. Each of these work groups will evolve with opportunities, but it's a tremendous energy, and people will get a lot done. So anyone who's interested should come on the 21st, and we'll be sending more information out, and we really appreciate your leadership at the paper. You guys do a wonderful job, community-spirited journalism, it really matters.
Well, we try.
And with GNAT as well. who's
GNAT, what a
been very
terrific
helpful.
job they've done with the shows.
Absolutely.
Well, great. Well, gentlemen, we'll look forward to seeing you both again on May 21st,
Yes,
and
indeed.
perhaps we'll have you back again, Paul, for a final wrap-up on all of this once the dust settles or whatever the appropriate
We will
metaphor
never
is.
let the dust settle in Manchester.
No, it doesn't seem
Manchester
to.
won't allow the dust to settle.
But anyway, great. Thank you both for making the time to be here today, and thank all of you for tuning in and watching, and you've been listening to The Front Page on GNAT-TV. Have a great day, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you.